I don't think anyone watches these rambling introductions I make because I mean, it's kind of my fault. I make them too generic because you can't start too strong. Because if you start too strong, you use all your energy, and when you have no energy, you die. That's the first rule of thermodynamics. So anyway, I finished my Celtic army. I did a unit of ancient British Javelineers, and we're going to look at how I made those Javelineers.
Hello, dudes of all teenagers. You may be wondering, as time has passed, what happened to my Celtic army? Did it, like the Celts themselves, disappear into the annals of history? While I have been starting new armies, I knew at the time I was mistaken, but not wrong, for abandoning my Celts. I had gone to the proverbial milk shop for cigarettes because the ancient Britons were all grown up. I had finished nearly every unit. There were only a couple left, and I wanted to paint some elephants so the Mauryan Empire looked, unique and attractive. And then I've never seen a Joseon Korean army in person before, so I had to start that. And then the Japanese were all over, just like in World War II. But the Celts could take care of themselves, right? Right? Well, I had to be right, because I can never be wrong. It's just not possible. The real world was coming, and it was coming fast. We had a once-in-a-lifetime recession. Then we had another one. I got cancer, syphilis, and the new iPhone at the same time. That was pretty bad, but I got over it. Just shrugged it off. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Apart from long-lasting, wasting illnesses, like cancer or syphilis. Meanwhile, I could feel the Celts slowly wasting away in the dark places, like a Chaos Emerald exploding at full mana when charged. I was ready to take on the Celts. I had sent enough emails. It was time to do the work. It was time to take the power back. Or, as the old saying goes, time to put my mouth where my cock is. I didn't have much prep time. I just kind of decided that it was time. It had been too long. That's what she said. So as I was gluing and painting, I was just yelling incoherently the whole time. Something like and the fire department only investigated my house twice in that period.
Get out of my room back. I just want to sleep.
No, you don't understand! I have all these Celts to paint. There's so many Celts. All these Celts are just in the room. They have to be accurate to the law. Okay? They have to follow the law.
Can't you paint them tomorrow? Also, what are Celts?
The last part of my ancient Britons were the skirmisher units. I conceptualized these units as the poorest members of the Iceni, the ones who couldn't afford armor. To visualize these ideas, these units were the first to include naked fighters in my army. Clothes cost money, being naked is free, but it's a bad idea to say this on dates. Miniature Celts and dating are actually really incompatible. At least normal people vaguely know what Warhammer is. Historical wargaming is literally a niche within a niche. You're about as common as the people who paid for WinRAR and literal billionaires. Now I know how they feel, in their huge mansions, surrounded by hundreds of small warriors, yet ironically still alone. Because loneliness is of the heart, not of the company. The naked Celtic warrior is also an archetype I wanted to create, and I hadn't explored such nakedness before in my army. Not because I am sexually repressed, because I'm not, what would give you that idea? But because not many sculpts in 1/72nd depict naked figures. The Zvezda Celtic set contains a naked warrior, but I didn't notice, and so I painted pants on him. So I decided that I wanted to depict the naked archetype in the few units that I had remaining for this army. So going into this, I knew I wanted at least a few naked people. So maybe there is more in common with my hobby and dating life than I thought. All my skirmish units are conceptualized as scouts, so they had to communicate with Carnexes. So I have Carnex models on every unit, including this one. I also wanted this unit to adhere to the themes I had set for my whole Ancient Britons army, being bare flesh, multicolours, plaids, woad, disorganization, and being rough and ready. I was careful in selecting the figures which would constitute this unit. This is my last unit. I wanted a good representation. I try to give many themes to each unit to set them apart from each other and give each base their own character. So this is the only Javelin unit in my army, so they are already distinguished. But I wanted to go further. I'm like a great inventor, how do we take this to the next level? You know what the rappers say nowadays, like go hard, next level, big further, super high, big deep. So to distinguish this unit, I came up with the following. This unit would have the most naked men, the most redheads, the least plaids and tartans, and no striped pants. My first slinger unit already had 2 naked female fighters and 1 naked male fighter, so this one would have more naked men. It just made sense. The skirmishers already had the least plaids because they're meant to be the least socially acceptable people, but this unit would have even less plaid. Also no stripes because the other units already have stripes, so not having stripes would make this unit more unique. The naked figures I had left were the Hat Carthaginian allies, 2 New Line Designs naked fanatic sculpts, some Linear A Hannibal crosses the Alps sculpts, and I had ordered some 3D prints from the March to Hell campaign by 3D Breed Miniatures, but they haven't even arrived yet now that I'm making this. So I couldn't use those sculpts, and I wanted to make the unit as soon as I could, so I ended up selecting the Hat figure, one of the New Line Designs models, and a Linear A sculpt, because I like using models from a variety of companies, because I don't like being beholden to one. I'm getting those Games Workshop flashbacks right now, but also I like to have a varied look to my units. The Hat figure was a favored inclusion because earlier I had green stuffed anatomically correct penis and testicles onto the model, and so I wanted to put my work to use. What's the point of sculpting the dick and balls if no one ever gets to see them? Time to put my mouth where my cock is. I needed time to stare at which naked man would make the best representative for the Celts, and after looking through the roundup, I've chosen my top 3. But I still had so many Celtic sculpts that I haven't used in this army yet, from Airfix, Caesar Miniatures, Linear A, New Line Designs, and even the recent resin sets I bought from Germania Figurin, and some figures from Spira Miniatures. I have some 3D STLs shipped from 3D Breed. How could I go on to choose the clothed and therefore least important members of the unit? Well, one of the most important considerations when building a unit is choosing the leader, the focal model, at the center of the unit to hog the attention. I realized that I wanted a leader figure from the Linear A Hannibal Crosses the Alps set 5. Firstly, it references a classic Peter Connolly drawing. In today's postmodern TikTok environment, references are all we have left. I know a lot of Celtic enjoyers grew up with Peter Connolly illustrations, so I wanted to pay tribute to that on some level. Secondly, the figure fits in with the theme of all my other Celtic skirmish leaders. He is unarmored. He has an adorned helmet. All my skirmisher leaders have big hats. However, I did buy Germania Figurin's Celtic Command Group set recently, and I was very keen to include a member from this set into this base. I initially wanted one of the leader figures because they are great sculpts and they're quite different. If you look at the bronze decorations, you look at the boots and the breastplate and the ornate helmet combo, you'll get what I mean. But in the end, the Peter Connolly reference is too good. I owe it to this man who I don't even know. So that is 4 models down. and half the unit. How did I select the last 4 members of my unit? With my feelings, of course. I had been converting a Queen Boudica model from Civilization 5 for a very long time. Ever since I was doing my research on Celts and I came across Civ 5's depiction, I was very impressed by the design of her dress. I just liked the complex system of straps, and she also had that cool swirly arm decoration. So I decided to convert a representation. I finished the figure fairly recently, and then I gave it some undercoat, so I was always going to use her in this unit. That is 5 figures chosen. I kind of chose the last person in the front rank on a whim. I thought he was pretty dynamic, with his foot raised, and that's nice. He's holding javelins, so that's another point. The unit didn't have any Revel models yet. 6 figures down. I needed a Carnix model. After snubbing Germania Figurin in the playoffs for the leader, I gave them inclusion for the finals with their Carnix blower from the Commander set. He was kind of competing with a few other Carnix blowers from Linear A and New Line Designs, but those companies had already been represented. It was time for resin. 7 models selected. Okay. So the last guy was just a pose I liked, made by Linear A. It's not naked. Maybe he could have been painted naked, but I didn't see a dong, so I gave him pants. I just like how he looks while crouching. There's very few contexts you can use a sculpt, which is crouching and looking down other than from a vantage point, so it was just the right context, and I like the sculpt. I like the pose and the limed hair. So that's everyone. That's 8 figures. They all made the cut. These are the ones that made the cut. Some of the models already had paint on them. That's because sometimes when I'm painting, my pots leak, or I have spare paint on my palette and I don't want to waste it, so I just run down and use the paint on any spare figures I have. So that's the reason. It actually saved a decent amount of time in making this unit. So some motherfeffers did not make the cut. Caesar Miniatures, classic artwork boy, did not make the cut. Some nice Linear A sculpts didn't make it. Hat Screaming Woman did not make it, but I really did think she would, but in the end she just wasn't as fun as the Naked Men. And then there's all these New Line Designs, Spira Miniatures, Revel Models, 3D Breed hasn't arrived yet. You can't include everyone. There's 8 spots, you know? It's like job hunting nowadays. It makes me think that at some point I should start Galatians or Gauls or the Celtic allies for Carthage or the Hellenistic successors. I just have so many incredible thoughts on how to use these models. But not for this unit. They just couldn't make the cut. So when making this unit, after selecting the models, then I do the prep work, I file off the mold lines and I assemble. For the leader and the crouching Celt, I drilled out the hands and gave them Italeri javelins because the accuracy of my figures matter to me. I gave the New Line Design guy a javelin a while back. I clipped the hat figure's spear into a javelin, and then I was ready for painting. So when I start painting, I track and time my progress by number of days. The measure by which I track my progress begins after undercoating and converting and building. Once I'm ready to actually start painting, that's when I start the clock. So by this measure, the unit started on the 18th of June. The first figure I worked on was the Civilization 5 Boudica figure, which I named Isolde in my army. Isolde is a conversion from Dark and Light Alliance Modern Amazons Set 1, with a green stuff dress and a new head with green stuff hair. The dress was built up over layers, with the initial fabric done, then straps were layered on, and the buckles and such. I painted her to resemble Civ 5 Boudica as much as I could, so giving her the red hair coincided with the theme of this unit of having more redheads. The original Alliance sculpt is dual-wielding weapons, which I thought was cool, so I kept that. There are a smattering of axes in my Ancient Britons army, and she is one of the few armed with an axe. It appears to me that Civ 5 Boudica wears more stripes than plaid, so that matches the less plaid theme. The complexity of the dress meant it took 2 days to paint. I wanted her skin to be lighter, so I started with a dwarf flesh base, then I layered with elf flesh, then I mixed white with elf flesh as a highlight layer to have an overall lighter tone. The surface area of her face is so small that I could not get all the Civ 5 woad patterns on her forehead, but I think the depiction is close enough. Isolde was finished on the 19th of June. The second figure I chose to paint was the naked front ranker, and I chose him because I wanted a break from complexity. Painting human flesh is just building up layers, and it's relatively simple. I started him late on the 19th of June, and I finished him the next day. The hardest elements for him was deciding how to paint the shield and the blue eyes. Now I wanted his shield to be a little bit different, so it's got two colored rims against a very dark blue background, which is not usual for my shields. I don't usually have two colored rims, but it's got checks, which many of my other Celtic shields have. He's got blue eyes because the Celts did, and I want to highlight his racial features. I'm also making armies based in Asia and no one has blue eyes, so I like to highlight differences between my different armies. On the 20th of June, I started my Revel front ranker model. Now, since he already had his clothes filled in, I just had to paint the face, the shield, and touch up on the clothes. I wanted to give the shield many colors because the Celts are a colorful people in this army's representation. I did not give him plaid or tartans because he's a lowly, poor skirmisher, so he can only afford simple clothes. This actually took a bit longer than expected because adjusting the face took some time and making sure that the shield popped. So I finished him on the 21st of June. On the 21st of June, I also started applying Talon flesh on the Crouching Celt skin because my paint pot is shite and leaks everywhere like a CIA project, and I didn't want to waste the paint. I have a real problem with Games Workshop Foundation paints. For some reason, all of mine seem to leak whenever I close the lid. Can you just make better pots? I don't have this problem with other Games Workshop paints. Oh, you don't make foundation paints anymore. Isn't that interesting? Maybe it's because the pots are garbage. As I applied the lotion on the skin, I thought of the past struggles of the Celtic people and how we all deserve representation in the Roman cultural sphere, and this only increased my rage, fueling my painting skills to get a nice, even coat. Because the Talon flesh was spilling everywhere, like a responsible oil company's project, I ended up base coating the skin of my Khan Explorer too. Anyway, with a limited time in the day left, I did the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon's face, shield and pants, and called it a day. I had acquired some new Games Workshop paints, which I had not used in this army before, being Rust Grey and Fenrisian Grey, so I was eager to get some new colors in the army. On his pants. Now, I didn't give him woad war paint because I was going to give the other Linear A model some, so it's good to differentiate the figures to make them seem as unique as possible. I wanted to see if I could make new variations of Celtic shields, so he was given a different quartered color pattern of pink and teal. On the 22nd of June, I touched up details on the whole model and so had finished the figure. Now, let's cover the naked New Line Design sculpt. It was still the 22nd of June, I grabbed his nakedness out and started frantically painting the hair and highlighting the skin, painting his green eyes and luscious lips, getting the red hair right, and just finishing the figure in one go. I was using the Army Painter's Barbarian Flesh as a base coat, then I added white to build up highlights in layers. I like to vary my skin tones in a unit for more variety, and I'm very mercenary with the companies I endorse. Games Workshop Trauma coming up again. I didn't give him woad because his nakedness had a purity about it, and I did not want to ruin his innocence. He seemed very Adam-esque in an Adam and Eve sort of way. Painting naked figures is really easy. Skin is just one color. You don't need freehand, so you have time to highlight the penis and everything. Not even in a sexual way, just like in a painting way. Get your mind out of the gutter, not gay. It was time to blow some carnixes. 22nd of June, I was base coating clothes and hair. Then 23rd of June, I was applying highlights and patterns. I gave him blue eyes because I want this unit to have more colored eyes, and I gave him a basic plaid pattern because he has bronze decorations around his belt, so he looks a little wealthier. He can afford the good stuff. He is the first and only resin model in this army and the first and only representation of Germania figurine. I gave him some war paint for good measure and red hair, and he was done by the 24th of June. The Linear A Celtic Javelineer was started on the 24th of June. I did the skin with the classic tanned flesh, dwarf flesh, then elf flesh combo. I wanted something a little different for the shield though, given that it would be one of the last Celtic shields I would paint for this army. So I scoured the internet for designs I liked, then I found the one. Double horses. That was it. It was simple and geometric, but also punchy. Who doesn't like horses? I decided to use Fenrisian Grey as part of the colour scheme because I had not used it as a base coat yet, and that was the canvas for my double horses. On the night of the 24th, I carefully got the horses done, then blocked in alternating red and white checks in the middle portion of the shield because many of my Celtic shields use checks, and I wasn't about to break habits. I gave him green eyes and some woad stripes to differentiate him from the crouching linear A sculpt. I think the model could be interpreted as wearing pants, but pants or pantsless legs look pretty similar in this scale, so I decided to make him naked, but with shoes. That is true fetish material. Also gave him a yellow scabbard for his dagger because I thought it would be a nice change. I started my leader figure in the closing hours of the day on the 24th of June. I painted the leader as closely as I could to the original Peter Connolly drawing. On the 25th, I was building up layers trying to capture that orange-brown of the illustration, which for me was a base coat of ratskin flesh, blended with blazing orange and worked up to pure blazing orange as highlights. The skin was again the classic tanned flesh, then dwarf flesh, then elf flesh. I decided to give him red hair to, further the redhead theme, and sky blue eyes which you could get lost in. Now I blocked in the reds for the shield, I painted scorched brown stripes for the cloak. As the night set in, I outlined the scorched brown stripes with black and cut the brown with black in the center in a very time-intensive process. I painted his blue eyes, highlighted the hair, did the yellow and black patterns on the shield, but the shield was a little small for all the little black marks in the original illustration, so I didn't do that. And after a few more details, I was basically done on the 25th. The eyes, though, were too big, and it bothered me. At first I thought I could just let it go, but I had to go back and make them more realistic. So on the 27th of June I was examining the figure, getting ready to glue him into the diorama base, and then it hit me. I had to do the eyes properly. So I sat down and made the eyes smaller, and then the figure was done. All 8 figures had been completed. So looking and assessing all the figures, I think I had adhered to the themes of the whole Celtic army. There are plaids, bare flesh, woad, limed hair, and disorganization. As the skirmishers are some of the least prestigious units in the army, the plaids are minimal, with this unit having the least in the army. There's bare flesh everywhere, there's woad and limed hair, and everyone's got different colors. So, all good. Time to finish the whole unit with the base. My skirmisher units are made on diorama bases, waiting on cliff sides or high hills to imply their light-footedness. I like to use the height of the base foundation itself to tell a narrative, and that usually means depicting an attack downhill. In this case, I see the unit as poised, looking down upon the enemy and readying themselves to charge. I selected my models with the base in mind, then I posed them on the base with pre-planning before the final execution. I started cutting out the plasticard for the base on the 26th of June, then cut out foam to form the hill. I blocked in where the members would be with a marker. Then it was time to PVA glue the surface, except where the blue marks are, and cover it in sand. It took time to dry, so I did 1 layer of glue and sand and then went to bed. On the 27th of June, I added more sand to the gaps, and I touched up any weird areas with sand, and then I spray painted the whole thing black. After the undercoat had dried, it was time to glue in the figures. I filled in the holes with PVA glue, I added the figures on with PVA glue on the base, then I loaded over the whole thing with sand, blending in the figure's base with the unit's base. When all 8 models were added, I then waited for the glue to dry before painting the new sand with black to blend in the colors with the unit's base. I waited for the black undercoat to dry, then I painted the sand with scorched brown, then I laid with bestial brown, then snakebite leather. Another classic Games Workshop recipe. After that, I based it in the same way that I base all my Celtic units. I applied PVA glue in patches, then I sprinkled on some modeling grass, this colourful flock stuff, And then I added some shrubs and some flowers, and then the whole unit base was completed on this one day. Unit complete. Mission accomplished. But nothing ever really ever ends. You can let go of the Celts, but the Celts cannot let go of you.
Well, that wasn't so painful, was it? So, we have now discussed... I can say anything, no one watches these, right? I can just think, yeah, we've done the thing, and it was good, and there were Celts painted, and we painted a lot of Celts, you know. A lot of Celts have been done over the years. Okay, I didn't have a script, so I was just trying to invent things. Let's do it again.
Every waking moment, all I feel are Celts. I feel the Celts in the air, Celts on my face. Celts. They are all around us. It is time to send in the police. The Celts are here. I don't know where to go. It's Celting time. Celts. Celts. Celts.
Damn, boy. Damn, boy, he's thick, boy.